Welcome to the Daily Devo. My name is Diana. Today we are talking about representation. When we see Jesus, we see God. We are looking at what the book of Hebrews tells us about Jesus. Listen to today's verse. It's Hebrews 1, verse 3. It says, "The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word." And it continues to go on. It says, "After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty of heaven." The start of the verse is what we're going to look at today. It said that Jesus is the exact representation of his being. Let's unpack that for a moment. What does the phrase exact representation mean? Well, a coin or a piece of currency is the exact replica of the true standard. Because a counterfeit bill, it's worthless, right? Only an exact replica of, let's say, a $100 bill is actually worth $100. If it's not an exact replica, it's considered counterfeit. A trademark is an exact representation of authenticity. Well, Jesus, he possesses all of the divine attributes. Jesus is God. And the book of Hebrews is reminding us of that Jesus is in fact the exact representation of God. Jesus was asked this question about this same topic when he was alive and with his followers, and he answered it. Let's listen to this conversation. It's found in John 14, verses 8 through 11. And Philip said, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us." Well, Jesus answers, and he says, "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone," listen to what Jesus says. He says, "anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you," this is Jesus speaking, he says, "I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. Believe me," Jesus says, "when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe the evidence of the works themselves." You see, to know Jesus is to know God. To know and experience and walk in the ways of Jesus is to know and experience and walk in the ways of God. So what do representatives do? A representative from a professional team, for example, goes and talks to new recruits on behalf of the organization. And that representative, it is an extension, it is an example or an echo, you could say, of the culture, the character, the ways, the values of that team. Hebrews is saying that Jesus is not just a representative of God, it is saying he is an exact representation of God, a perfect representation of the heart of God, the mind of God, the values of God, the provision of God. You see, you and I have been given a precious and valuable look at God in Jesus Christ. So what do you see represented in Jesus today? What do you discover when you look at Jesus about the heart of God, the mind of God, the ways of God? Here's a bonus thought for us to consider. In a different letter, one of the earlier followers of Jesus, Paul, he's reminding Jesus followers that we too are Christ's ambassadors to our neighbors. That we will never be that perfect exact representation of Jesus like Jesus is of God this side of heaven. Yet, through obedience and surrender to Jesus and following Jesus, we can become more and more like his exact representation. And as we do, we start to echo the character of God, the heart of God, the values of God to our neighbors and those who are around us. Today, remember that Jesus is the exact representation of God. Do you want to know God? Look at Jesus. Discover who he is in the Word. Think on who Jesus is. And as you follow him in faith, remember that you get to echo that exact same heart in similar ways to those where you live, work, study, and play. Ponder these things, and we'll see you next time.